But while we're waiting for some other calls, we've got a couple of good ones, and we're going to go out to Arizona. We're going to be hanging with Stephen, he, him. Has a little bit of question about evolution and atheism and altruism. How are you, Stephen?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, pretty good. Ben and I are just hanging out and blaspheming, but what have you got for us today, man?
So, over the last few years, as we know, in the United States anyway, but also other countries, we've always had this strain of the progressive and the forward looking and the forward thinking versus what I'll refer to as the fearful. And it feels like beyond just simple pendulum swinging back and forth between political extremes, there's been more of a rage that seems to have been released. And I feel like, in my observations, that there is a group of people who are community-minded, compassionate, empathetic, who are able to believe those things with or without a God. I'm an atheist. But then there's this other group that is so driven by, I'm going to say fear, because I think everything comes back to that. That eventually expresses itself as hate and rage and all these other crazy things. Excuse me. That uses religion as the shield to justify their behavior. In a lot of cases, the Bible says this, or the Quran says that, or whatever book they have, Harry Potter, I don't know. So I'm wondering if overall I've been having this thought that maybe we are beginning to evolve to another level of psychology or altruism. I mean, humans have always been tribal. We kind of have evolved that way and what our concerns are, and we seek tribes. When our families are small, we seek other groups that will keep us safe, not even necessarily think the way we do, but tell us what to think, and we'll go along with it so we'll feel safe. And there's sort of this progression because you see the growing nuns, N-O-N-E-S, in this country, who don't believe in any particular religion. You see parts of Western Europe where the countries are much more non-religious or atheist, and other communities sprouting up around the world that are saying we can be good people and be community-minded without believing in a deity, without believing in a religion. And I feel like it feels like we're splitting almost into two species in that way, that there's a group of us who can think one way, very easily,
I
and
love
it's
where
logical.
I love where your thoughts are going. I do want to jump in so that we can have more of a dialogue
Sure.
here. But I want to clarify real quick. What do you mean when you say evolution? Are we talking a biological process? Are we talking? Are we using evolution as a term metaphorically to mean a shift in thought process? How exactly are you using this term?
Well, kind of both. What I mean by it in particular, I'll go back to the tribal example. So first you worry about your family, then you worry about your extended family, then you worry about your tribal community, and that eventually grows up to be a country, and goes on from there. And for some of us, I have a particular set of experiences. I've worked around the world. I've lived outside of the United States. You see commonalities in the way that people want happiness in their family, in their lives, whether it's who they love or how they love or whatever it is. So, and what their goals are to be successful, whether it's in a capitalist society or wherever. But they want that for everyone, regardless of what the differences may be, where there is a separate group that is behind, in my view, that doesn't get to that point of everybody gets to have this. It's a difference between everybody gets to have this or you only get to have this if you are still part of my tribe, whatever that means. And I feel like that extra step is either a psychological shift or is it something biological that lets us feel that way?
I want to ask some questions again, because I want to take this in a direction where we think kind of what brought us here. So we have this. If you're saying this end result, at least right now, is that these different communities are developing to where one favors altruism and that kind of thing, and you have this other group that hasn't really moved past looking out for their own group. What factors do you think may have led up to this? Like, if we take humanity over the course of its development, what has changed about now versus back when humans were more tribally focused?
Okay, we can say, well, the quick and easy, stupid answer, pardon me, is technology. But in between the very beginning of this tribal stuff to where we are now, we've had these impositions of things that maintain the tribalism. So whether it's language, whether it's religion, whether it's nationality or ethnicity, you look like me and I look like you, so we're part of the same group. Thumbs up. Let's go get a pizza. Since we were talking about pizza, now I'm hungry. So you have all of that going on that kept it enforced, that kind of held down this idea. Because, and part of it is, in my upbringing, there was a certain level of, I'll call it patriotism, because jingoism is a better word, that the American standard of how we make government was better than what they had done before, because we established a secular state, right? We said goodbye to religion, and that was supposed to be a step forward, as one example, that we finally reached that in this country. So much for that. Look at where we are. But anyway, so there were always these structures that were imposed on us to keep that mindset going. When I lived in Europe, I said to people, we are a manufactured state as a country. That's why we have to do the Pledge of Allegiance every morning. We have to be reminded that we're American, in my view. So it's this idea of continually imposing systems. And then in the last 30 years with the internet, give or take, you have this ability to look cross borders and look across into other communities and get other information to say, wait a minute, they want the same.
So besides technology, because even before the internet, right, we had communication between cultures, and I think it's not as much technology as it is communication. And I think globalism especially has taken us to this place where we're at now, because looking back, you had trade between different groups of people, and if the only thing you knew about this other group was that we trade with them, they have things that are different than me, it's very easy to isolate yourself and say, yeah, we're the only ones that matter. These other people just bring us stuff and we trade and they leave. But as we've, established more communication, I think that's the key variable here. And I don't know if I can point to anything specifically biologically that would make people more or less altruistic. And I don't even know if we have evidence to say that we are more altruistic now. If we look back at different cultures, you look at examples like ancient Persia had very good examples of bringing in captives from war, and they would often let people have their religion that they had been using. They had prioritized science and working towards a more welcoming society. So I think it's a bit incorrect to say that we're heading in that direction, because I don't know if we have enough evidence to assert that.
Well, in fairness, I appreciate your example. I don't know that I agree with it as a good one, because there was still a structure that, you may be welcome to bring in your religion, but I don't think they would let those slaves or captives come in and convert the populace that was there and say this is a better idea. They still have.
Well, that's not what we're arguing. That's not what we're discussing, though, right? We're discussing an altruistic society. So if you're going to make the claim that we are more altruistic now, or we're heading in that direction, having an example of, well, these people were structured doesn't negate the fact that they might be more or equal to the altruism that we have, right?
How would you, just real quick, Stephen,
how
would you determine if we are more altruistic in today, 2022, than we were, say, in, 202, right? What would you use to kind of demonstrate that to us?
I think there are more people now, and it goes back to what Nate was talking about a little bit. I think you have gradations in the level of belief. We have, using the United States as an example, because we're all here, and it's the easiest one to access. You have the really hardcore, pardon my French, crazy people who are hardcore religious fanatics, who are believe the Bible literally, or whatever book they're using literally, and that it's a miracle and blah, blah, blah. And then you go all the way to the other end of the spectrum, and there's us, because I'm thinking you guys are closer to where I am than that other end. So probably, but there is this spectrum of people all the way in between. And while I'm not saying we're all more altruistic, we're definitely not all more altruistic, but there is a group of us that I consider myself a part of. You're both lovely, but I don't care what you do in the bedroom. I don't. And you might have a trapeze. I don't know. And good for you. I don't care what your belief system is. Well, yeah. I just hope you put the net underneath, but never mind.
Yeah,
so anyway,
safety first.
But there are ways I don't want to see you suffer. When I look at some of this stuff on TV, whether it's the people in the storm or the war or whatever's going on, and even all the stuff that came up with the pandemic, I wore a mask, not only so I wouldn't get sick, but if I was sick, you wouldn't get sick. I cared about that. And particularly in this area of Arizona, if you've seen any YouTube video of people attacking mask displays, it was right here, like within 10 minutes of my house. So I'm seeing that. I go to the 7-Eleven and there's a guy with a gun.
So here's my issue. I think we're relying here a lot on personal experiences and kind of the circles that you've been around. Like, how would we quantify levels of altruism? If I'm to say that we are more or less altruistic now, and then bringing in the point too of atheists being more or less altruistic than these theists, like how do we measure that? How do we quantify that? Could we statistically determine if a group is more altruistic than another? Because it's a very subjective measure that I just don't know if we can move beyond. And I have an opinion about these people, because I mean we do have plenty of atheists who are not altruistic and who are making things worse in the community. But I'm not usually associated with them. I don't hang around those people, so I know fewer of them personally. But how could we quantify which groups had more altruistic people than others, and how do we even measure that?
And that's a fair point. And I don't know that you can necessarily, I'm using the belief systems and religious systems perhaps inefficiently here. But my feeling is, like, I have Mormons who live across the street. They're lovely, and they bring me food all the time. And whether it's homemade chicken soup, baked bread, whatever, they know I'm a Democrat. They're Republicans. I had to look at a Trump flag all through the election. But we get along because they actually care about people. I don't know why they vote the way they do. I think their religion is Looney Tunes. Sorry for all the Mormons in the audience. But they themselves are lovely, and they actually care about their neighbors. They care about me, the bisexual Democrat living across the street, and bring me bread and soup and fruit and whatever. So it's not specific to a religion or a belief system. Sure. I get that. But they also don't want anyone to suffer. They don't want anyone to get sick. They don't want anyone to be a victim of crime, just like I do. And yet there are people that feel like, because of my sexuality, my sister wanted me to move to Tennessee. I was like, where do you want to put the bullseye? I don't know how you live there. Between being
as somebody who is in Tennessee, I definitely, but
like,
let me jump in for a second here, Stephen, because I think there are some pretty good points and some stuff we can kind of just highlight a little bit and stuff. One, I think that you were describing earlier about that innate sense in the people, the Mormons across the street for you, where at the end of the day, they really don't want to see other human beings suffer, whether they agree or disagree with them on political stances or ideology when it comes to old books and all that stuff. I think that is something that runs through all of us. I think oftentimes what happens is we don't exactly have it calibrated the best that it could be. And that's why I tend to gravitate towards things like secular humanism, because I think that is a better calibration in terms of who we extend that, what I like to call, give a shit to. It's just pretty simple, right? I mean, exactly, who is it that we care about? And it seems to be the case that, for all of us, there is at least some answer to that question. It may not be every single person in the world, but we have family or friends, we have coworkers or loved ones of all kinds that matter to us. And sometimes we just don't extend that same give a shit to those other people. The person that cuts us off in traffic instantly becomes a bad person, when in reality, they're probably a decent person, and maybe they just didn't see, maybe they're in a bad mood today, right? But I do think that kind of thread is something that goes through all of us as people. And I just to kind of get back to, an evolution going on in humanity, kind of what you called in about initially. I I think, yeah, we are seeing more of a shift in culture, but at the end of the day, kind of what Ben and I were saying, I don't know that I really have anything to indicate that, really. I have a feeling, and I have some anecdotes, and I like to think that we're going in that direction, right? Like, it makes me feel better when I wake up in the morning that that's where we're going, but I don't 100% know. And I don't exactly know how we would quantify that. I'm still going to fight for that. That's why I'm going to, keep hanging out here and doing shows and hanging with Ben and chatting up with all the good friends that we have and stuff, and still keep fighting for that progress, fighting for that better world. But are we there yet? I don't know. Are we even moving in that direction? Honestly, I don't know. But I think the more we talk about that, and the more we ask whether we're moving in the right direction, the more likely we are to have that calibration better, and the more likely we are to go in the right direction. But Ben, was there anything else you wanted to say? I think it was a good call, Stephen. But I throw it over to you, Ben, if you want to wrap
Well,
up something real quick.
I had a point actually.
Oh,
I'll let Ben jump in before I say.
No, you go for it real
Yeah,
quick, and then
give
I'll
us
hop in at
real
the end.
quick, and
I was
we'll let
just
you
gonna
go, and
say,
we'll move on.
The reason the reason I ask this is it feels like there are certain members of our society, our species, who are just an absolute brick wall in having these discussions. Like, everything you just said is perfectly reasonable and perfectly relatable, and to everybody, one would hope. But yet there are still people in our society who are like, no, you don't believe the way I do. No, you don't love the way I do. No, you don't eat the way I do. So no. And you don't get any of my empathy, compassion, anything. That it's such a brick wall that, in my experience, and granted it's anecdotal, but it just seems so prevalent that I wonder if there's always going to be people who aren't at that level yet, I guess is what I mean. And we all have 10 fingers and 10 toes, presumably. But, I remember reading articles 30 years ago that said we don't need the last toe on our foot. So someday in the future, we'll only have 8 toes. Who knows?
Well,
But
we'll definitely talk about that
Yeah.
another time, Stephen. But we do appreciate your call. Thank you so much. I do. I think again, this is the way that we do get better, is by constantly asking whether or not we are going in the right direction. But Ben, give me your thoughts on that, man. I was talking a lot there.
Yeah, I think that last statement, I don't know if I would chalk this up to something that is innate within people, or that is a cause of biology. I mean, sure, some people might be more biologically inclined to think in certain ways, but I think a lot of it's related to upbringing and what you're raised to think. And some people who are raised to hate other people are more likely to continue hating other people. And as you're seeing, like, young children, it's very difficult to get a young child to actually hate somebody, but they grow up and learn to do that. So I would chalk it up more to a nurture thing than to an evolutionary nature thing.
Mhm.
But I'm sure there's a lot more nuance to that conversation that
Yeah.
I don't really know much about, because that's a whole area of sociology and psychology that I don't study. But
Yeah.
it's definitely worth, looking into about kind of the nuance on that.
Yeah, and I think on the biology side of evolution, I mean, again, definitely not in any way, shape, or form my wheelhouse, but I mean, my understanding is that the idea that like evolution just stopped once people were around, like that's not the case, right? Yes, of course, our species is still evolving, but I as far as I know, again, we currently don't have anything that's like, hey, this is huge, this is a huge evolution in our genes, and that just totally makes us a different species now or anything. So if we do get any of that though, I mean, that'd be pretty fun. I'd love to find that. I would be cool with being like a slightly different advanced. Yeah, I don't know, I don't know what we evolve into, so maybe it's not gonna be as cool as I want it to be.